Welcome to A Better Divorce podcast, where we have conversations about the emotional, financial, and legal issues that are on your mind or should be on your radar if your goal is to keep your divorce out of court. I'm collaborative divorce attorney and mediator Andrea Vacca, and I know that how you divorce matters to your long-term well-being. That's why it's my mission to help you have a better divorce with as little acrimony as possible, so that you can create the best life possible on the other side of your marriage. Hello, this is Andrea Vacca, and this is the Better Divorce podcast. And today I'm going to be speaking with my former client, Ginny Poleman, to discuss her divorce journey. As we've done with other former clients, find out what they've learned from their divorce in the process and afterwards, so that can help you have a better divorce. So let me introduce you to Ginny. Ginny's a writer. Hi. She's a writer and a New York City tour guide. She's a blogger that writes about divorce and dating for an online magazine called Better After 50. She owns a tour company called NYC Encounters, which gives in-person walking tours and online webinars about New York City history. She leads tours at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York about fashion for the Costume Institute, and she tutors middle and high schoolers in academic and creative writing. So, Ginny, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I sound really busy.
You do sound busy. That's why it took so long to get you scheduled for this.
That's right.
Months we had to wait, right? So,
yes.
Yeah. So I'm so glad you're here. You know, as I've thought about clients I've worked with who I thought could really help other people with their divorces, you've always come to mind, and you've always stood out to me as someone who, despite not wanting the divorce, accepted that it was happening. You pulled up your sleeves, you got to work, you always made sure you had the best possible outcome for yourself. And it might seem second nature to you, but it's not easy, and it's not everyone can do it. And so, you were in mediation and I was your mediation consulting attorney. And my goal always is to help clients who, when I'm serving in that role, have the wherewithal to be the best advocate for themselves in mediation. And you've always exemplified a client who could do that. So did it feel that way to you when you were in the middle of your divorce?
Yeah, absolutely. But I also believe that's part of my personality. If you've asked my brothers or my parents, I'm not quiet about advocating for myself. And my ex-husband as well. So I think he was kind of expecting that I would step up to the plate and, give it my best shot of being prepared and knowing what I wanted to get out of it, and taking advantage of all the resources I had, including you.
Yeah. Yeah. And we really worked closely together. So what do you think you did right in looking back to help yourself advocate for yourself, even though it might be second nature to you? What did you do?
Well, it would be second nature to me is to do the research, going and reading articles and talking to experts in divorce and talking to friends who have been through it, and sat down with many of them because everybody had a quite, slightly different experience, had a different relationship with their soon-to-be ex-husbands. And it gave me a lot of insight, what I wanted and what I didn't want. And I'm not even just talking about in the negotiations, I'm talking about even in the relationship. So as you know, Tom and I had a pretty congenial relationship. We wanted to get through this in a fair way that was equitable. And I would say, we would come back out the other side of it still being able to speak to each other. And you and our mediator did a good job in making sure that, we would continue to do that. So I was lucky in that respect, but that was something I did to prepare for it. And I'm glad I did, because it's a messy course, no matter how prepared you are, you just don't know. There's somebody on the other side of the table who's advocating for himself too.
That's
so
right.
That was the learning curve.
Right. And that's what you can't always control, right? How what the person you're divorcing is going to do or feel or say or ask for.
Yeah.
You don't know what will end up coming from them. So, you do your research and you think you know who you're married to and you can expect how they'll be in the divorce.
Yes.
But of course, when bumps come up, what without for you, from your point of view, how did you deal with any bumps in the road that came up when you couldn't control them
Yeah.
and you weren't prepared? Maybe.
Well, like I said, I'm really fortunate that I have a nice team around me. I knew who I could call just to rant to. I knew who I could call to get financial advice, who I could call to, reveal intimate information. And I'm not just talking about intimacy. I'm talking about like real numbers. What we're talking about, and sharing my financial situation. I had people I knew I could just, cry to, and I knew who would tell me everything's going to be okay. So I was really lucky that I had such a beautiful team of people around me. And so when I did hit the bumps in the road, I had somebody on speed dial. And it also helped to have a masseuse that you can go and have a massage. She would let you just cry on the table when you needed to, as well as, just the superfluous people that are in your life that really see who care about you. And so those chips and bumps were inevitable. And I guess that's what I would say to anybody going through this. And you don't know when they're coming, and you don't know how you're going to respond to them. So that's part of the expect to be tripped up once in a while, no matter how prepared you are. So that's how I dealt with it. I know I'm super fortunate, and all those people are kind of still in my team still today, so that's nice.
So you chose well.
Yeah.
I've been hearing myself say this week more than once, and it's only Thursday, that it takes a village. It really takes a village to do divorce well. Whether it's putting your own little team around you or letting your divorce professionals create the team for you, or both. It's not something you can just do by yourself, or hopefully, if you've done it before, maybe it's only once before. It's not something people have experience in. So finding and reaching out to the right people, you knew how to do that, and your background and research really helped, I guess.
And it also helped, like when I had financial questions, and those people, like you were excellent. Our mediator, who you worked with too, was excellent in providing resources for me. So when I did have those questions, I can go to somebody and add them to the team. Obviously, I'm incredibly privileged in the sense that I could pay for that, kind of advice. And that gave me a broader professional part of it, other than the emotional side of it. So I did have a nice opportunities to answer the technical questions, like the business part of it. And again, some of those people are still, I'm still using as advisors for my life now.
Your financial advisor that you introduced you to, and you're still working with her, right? I know that's at least one of them. So is there anything that you wish you had done differently that, during the divorce? Is there anything different?
That's a good question, because one of the things I've learned more recently is I give myself a lot of grace. So in other words, I did the best I could under the circumstances and the resources I had. As you know, we negotiated the last parts of my contract during COVID.
Right.
And when financially there's a lot of unrest and possible changes and outcomes, and I had to hedge my bets. So I kind of regret that I didn't push it until after COVID. But you also know that we had been talking for years before we actually sat down with that contract, and it was just time to expedite it. And he was giving me the pressure to, like, we need to do this because I'm freaking out right now during COVID. And so that was part of the concession that I made, and I regret a little bit. But outside of that, which was a rare circumstance. I feel like I handled it as best as I could. Um, the things that I wish I could have changed, I didn't have any control to change anyway.
You didn't have
So
any control. I didn't catch that. You didn't have control
I didn't
over
have
it.
any control to change those things anywhere. Like, I wish he chose a different attorney. So, and in retrospect, what I didn't have any control over that. So we did the best that we could. And I say we, meaning he and I and you and I and the mediator and him together, based, and thankfully that has a lot to do with my relationship with him to begin with. So I'm pretty lucky at that. So no, I don't really feel like I would do anything differently
Yeah.
in the things I could have controlled. So I'm
Yeah,
lucky in that respect. Yeah.
that's wonderful to look back that way. COVID was hopefully once in a lifetime,
Yeah.
event, and you and many other clients we were working with at that time had to balance
Mhm.
all the unknowns that COVID brought up, all the things that we thought we knew were no longer. We didn't know how long it would last. People get tired
Yeah.
and exhausted, and you had to balance moving, keeping going, and not having all the
Hmm.
information. And it was not easy for anyone, of course. So
Yeah. Yeah. During that whole period, we were also selling our house. So I guess that would be another thing I wish we had put off until, later that year. But again, you have no idea, we were just hedging. Let's get this done and over with. And so, no regrets because I can't do anything about that. So,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, you thought about putting it on the market, and that just happened to be putting it on the market. Just you were planning just as COVID hit, and prices were not
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
not
We put it
risen
on the
yet.
market before COVID, but we were negotiating. Oh, it was messy. I don't even
Oh,
want to
that's what it
talk
was.
about
Okay.
it.
Woo, well, you got it sold.
It's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you mentioned that you have, you had different advisors and friends, and I know you also relied on family, your brother, and,
Mhm.
was it I'm sure that was so helpful to have somebody, people so close to you, people around you far who could be objective, those who could not be objective, but
Mhm.
knew you. I mean, you really had to balance all of the different help that you had to get to figure out, what do we do? Do we buy? Do we sell? Do I move? You were buying your own apartment at the time. There was so much
Yeah.
going on. You had already moved, I think, at that point, but there's just
Yeah.
so many
Yes.
moving pieces.
Yes. And I navigated it as best as I could. And like I said, I have the resources to do it. So that is also very helpful. And so I had the cooperation of him to do it too. I couldn't have bought my place without him, helping me get my mortgage and get through the co-op board, hoops you have to jump through. So he was incredibly cooperative and helpful in that respect. So, yeah, I couldn't have done that without him.
Right. You 2 worked so well together. You found your apartment, and as the lawyer who's trying to be, conservative, like, "Are you sure you wanna buy this now before everything's settled?" And you're like, "This is it. I wanna buy it." And he worked with you. We didn't have anything agreed to yet. You 2 really worked well together, and it was really lovely to see that, he wanted this for you too, and you
Yeah.
took the risk, he took the risk, it all worked out, but, because you had the strength of your relationship and the respect that you each had for each other.
Yes, and that's why I feel really fortunate. It doesn't mean that there weren't bumps in the road, and there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that you didn't see. But that was, one of the things I think you asked me too was how much did I communicate? Oh no, somebody else asked me this recently. How much did I communicate with him? Not always through the lawyers. And I was super lucky that I could just call him directly and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm going to communicate to Andrea and then to the mediator. This is what I want to come up. And so we were already kind of making some decisions before we even got to, the paperwork.
Yeah.
And thankfully, that was something that was important to both of us. and that, for a family, we have two grown children. So, there was never going to be there was no child support involved in all of this. And, we were pretty much on the same page about how that would look. And thankfully, still today, that we can still function like that.
Yeah, to be amicable and be parents to your children and now grandparents, which I wanna talk more about. And,
Yes,
um,
yes.
but first, I'd like to know a little bit about what therapy you were like, I know you had a massage therapist, but, I believe you were in therapy at the time too. So would you
Yes,
like to talk a little bit about, how that how why that was important to you and how it helped you?
yes. That therapy is still really important today. And she and I started talking, just as the marriage was really deteriorating, like it looked like on the horizon that it wasn't going to work out. So she and I had been together through that whole entire, um, all those years of separation and divorce. And I also have a very, very good friend who is a psychologist. She's a doctor as well, not a practicing one, but she became kind of my at-home free therapy. And between the two of them, thankfully, they were very much on the same page about, how they were responding to some of my challenges. And that helped me grow up, for lack of a better term, mature just in general about myself and help me identify things that I had blind spots on. And part of those of being, what was I mourning and what was I grieving? And, when I really came down to, I was grieving the loss of a potential that really wasn't there. And if I had to really pull off all of the masks and the facades that were built up and armor that was built up in my life with my husband, I'm still revealing those moments where I was like, oh yeah, that wasn't so fun. I'm so glad I don't have to do that with him anymore. And they were very helpful in helping me kind of get back to myself and finding, that young woman, that he first met, and kind of getting back to her and her ideals and her expectations and her standards. And you know, remembering that I'm going to be okay and I'm going to be fine on myself, on my own, and the future was going to be better.
Mhm.
And I'm still, I still have those people in my life. And I don't need it to the same degree as I did during that time period, but definitely things to keep popping up. And January, I still get moments where I'm surprised about how I respond to something. And it helps to have that foundation there through the therapy to kind of get through it faster than it was before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we had talked before
Mhm.
before today we were talking, and you mentioned how, the grief can come up as, in the beginning, like waves will hit you and knock you down, and you were prepared for that. People had warned you about that. And then you said
Yes.
recently when the waves come, they're just kind of lapping at your ankles, right? Yeah, I love that analogy and the
Yeah.
visual of it. You wanna say more about that?
Yeah, it's funny because that conversation came up with my friend Nancy, who was just a few years ahead of me in her divorce. And we were actually at the beach when we had this conversation. And she says, "Yep, it's just going to come out of nowhere, and something's going to trigger you that you would have never expected." And part of it, so expect that. And so when they come, what my therapist has taught me how to do is not to let it drown me, not to get pulled in by the undertow, so to speak, if we're going to stay in that same analogy there, and be able to kind of splash it through it, but also accept it. It's okay. It's okay to cry for a day and be, woe is me for a bit. And thankfully, I have Nancy and my therapist and my ad hoc therapist to call. And it's like, oh, I'm going through this right now. And they don't even have to say anything, they just kind of need to listen and tell me that my feelings were valid, And one of the things I also quickly learned is who I couldn't have those conversations with because they weren't validating my feelings, like, oh, you're still dealing with that? Like, why don't just get over it?
Mm.
And I'm like, well, that's not helpful. Thank you. And be able to I know who those people are. And again, gave myself a lot of grace for accepting my feelings and knowing that they're totally okay. But I'm not getting hung up on them for 2 or 3 days. I'm not calling somebody to rant about it. It's more of like, ugh, I'm feeling this. I know where it's coming from now, and wasn't expecting that. So yeah, the laughing at the waves, and it's like, yeah, just kick it back, and
wait for it to
there's
pass.
no more. Yeah, and if we're gonna stay in that same metaphor still, it's not like I'm needing big rescuing anymore. I can just walk out, if that's part of it. And the funny analogies help me kind of chuckle at myself, like, oh, my other friend, she says, don't get in the toilet bowl, don't get in there and get in that swirl. And now I just have to text her and say, well, I'm standing on the toilet seat right now, about to dive in. And she, will call and tell me, okay, this is maybe we're not jumping in. So yeah,
Stay on the rim.
Yeah, stay on the rim, and close the seat. That's one of the things I've really gotten much, much better about, and can get through it quicker, and letting it go, maybe not. And my therapist has said, I might never let this particular thing go. But the fact that you can get out of it quicker and not let it hang you up for a few days, obviously is progress. So that still happens.
Huge progress for everything, to be able to move past the difficult challenges
Yeah.
and know that life has its ups and downs, and it could last a day, it could last a
Yeah.
week, it could last a year, but it will change. The good times and the bad times, they
Yeah.
will
And it's
change.
not even, it's, yeah, and it's not even about him or the divorce or my relationship. It's about my parents or my brothers or my kids or work. Those are all of those things that I have done so much better about recognizing, and that's with a lot of help of helping me identify those things. So yeah, I've been really helpful. I've been really lucky.
Yeah. Good to be grateful and, have gratitude for yourself too, and the grace that you show
Mhm.
yourself. It's so important. You'd
Yeah.
mentioned that you had never felt as oppressed in your life as when you saw that first separation agreement, and, you know, agree that you'd have to agree to, you're getting spousal support, but there were some conditions
Mhm.
on that spousal support. And, you were you really were offended by it, that, by certain things, like, which is it's standard in New York that if you remarry, spousal support goes away. And, sometimes people want to also add if you live with other people, and those things, I remember those things were really hard for you, and, it brought up a lot of, um, issues for you. Is there anything you'd wanna share there, or advice for other people or younger women,
Yeah.
about.
Um, well, I guess I would want to say right up front that this is, standard. It's funny how
Mhm.
I've had this conversation with a lot of people who are not divorced, and I tell them that they're like appalled by it. And the I guess I would want to say to younger women who are, getting married, that um, if you do decide to become an at-home mother and give up, your own earning power, just know that if it doesn't work out, that this is going to come up. And maybe if I had known that as a young person, when I first got married and when I was making that decision to stay at home with my kids, which was a privilege to be able to do, I would have thought twice about it. Because I felt like my contribution at home was contributing to his growth of his wealth and our wealth. So his wealth and his career was very much something I was a big assist on. And so when this came up that my spousal support had all these conditions on it, I felt like wait a minute, this is my money you're giving me. This is not like you're paying me to be quiet because, you're leaving me. This was like, no, no, I helped you build this wealth. I helped you get to this position at this job to make this kind of salary. And so you putting conditions on it when you get to do whatever you want really, really made me mad. And
Yeah.
it still makes me mad. It had nothing to do with what the conditions really are, because what it came down to was you and I discussed, where could I, where do I back off and where can I make up that, when it came right down to it, I really had no interest of remarrying or living with a man ever again. And that might change, but right now, I didn't feel like it was something worth fighting for. Um, and I hope he doesn't see this. um, that that was something I conceded on. And, he made some concessions on his end too. But it just, this was also during COVID when we were all kind of stuck in our houses by ourselves. And I was also kind of going through, that loneliness of not being able to see people, and my building not even letting me have visitors. So that was like, this could be my life, and that was a trigger part of it too, which is not really the case anymore. But it's interesting how to there are ways of getting around things. And that was the first time where I really felt like, here's a document that is standard, that basically has been, part of this patriarchal construct that, we are being supported by men always. And in his response to me is like, well, what makes you think you're not going to find a man who can't support you like I could? And that was a big eye opener for me, that he felt like that would be my solution.
Yeah.
And it just kind of goes to show what we are brought up with, and thinking about marriage and support, wealth, financial, that he's earning the money and we're just living off of it. That's what really ticked me off. And with the amount of sacrifices and accommodations I made to make sure he could have the career that really let him be very, very successful, while giving up some of my own drive and dreams, for what I had thought my future would look like. So anyway, yes, that was a big one. And you were very kind to let me rant. I remember that conversation very well. And I was so, so angry that he just didn't go with what I wanted. And I just wanted to strike all of that. And he was like, wait a minute. And so I was actually really surprised. And that's kind of where I would tell people, no matter how prepared you are, no matter how much you research, no matter how many resources you have, there's still somebody else on the other side who's going to, you've never had these conversations before, and, have these things come up for the first time, and really be, don't be blindsided that they might not agree with you.
Yeah.
And there's no amount of arguing that I could have done. And, it still actually is a little bit of a bone of contention between us as he gets to move in with women. And I shouldn't say women, one woman he did and move in with. And like, good luck to you. I can't do that because you put this condition on me. And
yeah.
yeah,
And
and
you,
I on that money.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. What?
I am dependent on that income coming from him.
Yes, you are, and you prepared, for what that would look like, and would it be enough? And it was, we
Mhm.
did a lot of work to make sure it would be okay. And there's certain parameters in which you have to live and conditions under which you have to live in order to keep getting it. And it's hard.
Yeah.
And so if I'm, what I'm hearing you say is, take a good look at, think about this before you give up your career,
Mhm.
your own money. I've had other clients and people have spoken to say, oh, keep at least one foot in the workforce, perhaps. Don't step out completely, just so that you have a little more control. And then, and if you find yourself where you found yourself, Ginny,
Mhm.
you negotiate the best you can, and you do the best you can with all the decisions you made during your marriage, which were the best for your family and for yourself and for
Yeah.
your relationship. And this is where you are, and you have to just move forward, keep moving forward.
Yeah. 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 It was a tough pill to swallow. And I think that's partly because always from the very beginning, when he and I first met in college and before we got married and before we had kids, my plan was to work. It was never for me something I considered I prepared myself to be a working person, to be in the business world and then have kids, naively. But still, that was kind of where I was thinking. I knew that being home with my kids full time was not really part of what I wanted. So for me, the amount of accommodation and sacrifice that I made, and then have that on the back end happen, was really kind of a slap in the face to me. I just felt like that was disrespectful to what I gave up and to help launch him, because at the beginning I made all the money and I was the one on the trajectory, and so all of that stuff kicked up in this particular case. So that's still something I'm still working through and still quite uh, irritated by, I'll say. But
Yeah,
I'm not jumping in the toilet bowl about it, but
right,
it still comes up.
still
Yeah.
there. I can see it. I feel it. I hear it. It's still there.
Yeah.
And at
Yeah.
the same time, you and he have a pretty good relationship for exes. Your son
Yeah.
has since married and had a child, your grandparents together.
Yeah.
You've spent major occasions together. Uh,
Mhm.
so how's it going? How's it going now? Being, as co-grandparents, seeing him when you need to see him. What's life like now?
Um, I think I have finally kind of found a groove. I tested a lot of different ways of approaching this at the very beginning. I thought, well, okay, we had a pretty good marriage for the most part, so we can have a really great divorce. And why not have it right now? But I still hadn't gone through all the emotional waves of grief and mourning and all of that. And there was a point where I had to realize, where a friend said to me, like, why are you going on vacation with him and the kids again? I don't want to hear it when you get back of how awful it was. And I'm like, well, that's not very nice of you. But it was like the first time where somebody said to me, it's like, why are you doing this? Like, it's not fun for you. And that's when I started setting up some more boundaries for myself. And then, of course, when we actually did go through the divorce contract, that was another moment. I'm like, oh, if I'm going to have all these limitations on who I'm living with and like who I'm dating, or if I'm going to get married, like, I don't even want him to know anything about that. And so that has been a boundary that's really helped me. I also kind of cut myself off from his social media, and actually have blocked him so he can't see me either. He was a little hurt by that, but all of those boundaries that I have set up for my own emotional well-being, and of course, the boundaries you have to set up with your kids too, about what you are, not putting them in the middle of these conversations. But I do have conversations with my kids about what's going on in their dad's life. Um, and when the grandbaby came, we went up together, and we went to the first visit together, and we do Christmas up there together, to celebrate with my son and his wife when my daughter comes in. We do all those things when we can together. Outside of that, though, I'm not really getting, I'm not kidding. Hey, you want to have lunch? No, I'm not doing that. And, when my daughter is in town or there's a family type of activity going on, I might, invite him or, join them. Well, we'll get, dinner or brunch or something with the kids. And outside of that, I'm not checking in on how are you. And occasionally there are different business things that do come up, that we still need to deal with. And thankfully, I get to use our car, which is technically his. But that's the only other time I check in. It's like, hey, I'm going to use the car this weekend. Everything okay with you? And he's like, yeah, that's fine. I can do that. And so, there are opportunities there where we cross paths, but we're not, at least I'm not going out of my way to spend time with him outside of those, family situations.
Sounds
And
really healthy where you are now. That's that you can be together, be
mhm,
with your children, your grandchild together when needed. It makes it better for the children, obviously, your adult children having both parents that you don't have to
mhm,
hide from or split their time with. Everyone's so busy. So to put the whole little family
yeah,
together is wonderful. And then you have set your standards and your boundaries so that you can
mhm,
separate and protect yourself. And so you found it sounds like you found a really good balance. And with regard
yeah,
to yeah, and for as a divorce attorney, that I that's dreamy to me, that my former clients can still be in the same room because my parents were not in the same room for 10 years after their divorce, and I don't want that for clients,
yeah,
of my own, and to know that you've been able to do that, and you still have use of the car, and as a New York City resident who doesn't need a car every day, like, having access to one when you need it is pretty
yeah,
awesome. So
yeah. Well, especially, I'm going up to visit the kids. They're up in Connecticut. They're like, hey,
yeah.
I'm going to go up in Connecticut and see the kids. And actually, one of the times I went up there, um, he's like, well, I was going to do this with the car, but why don't we, drive up part of the way and you can drop me off? And then it ended up being a crummy weather weekend. I'm like, why don't you just come with me? It was kind of a last minute, like, it's like, we'll call Michael, make sure he knows we're both showing up. And, that worked out fine. And it does allow, my son repeatedly has said to me, thank you, you know, while we were separated before we even got to the divorce negotiation. We had separated for a few years, and we had my daughter's graduation from college we had to do together with my whole entire family there. And my son got married, and we had to go through that. And that was really, really difficult. Just like, well, what is that going to look like? And my daughter's boyfriend said he wouldn't have even known that we weren't together. So we did all the parent things that we could, that were kind of required, and then I partied with my friends pretty much the rest of the night. And I had to, like, that's a great example of, this is not how I envisioned that my kids' weddings would look like, that we wouldn't be doing this together. But at the same time, if we had still been a couple, I think watching my son get married when I knew my own marriage was not healthy, um, I would have been so angry through that whole entire event. And in
Yeah.
which case, I could again put down that boundaries, like, we can go in as parents and as a couple, and then I don't have to spend the rest of the night with him, and I can have a great time. And I did, and that's how we do a lot of things. We went to another family wedding on his side of the family, and he was there with his then girlfriend, and I just kind of had to say, I actually don't know that guy too much anymore. And, let him do his thing on one end, and I did my thing with his family on the other end.
Right.
And, having to set up this kind of both emotional and physical barriers that will allow me to get through those tough moments, because they're hard. It's not, that's what I'm grieving, is the loss of what I thought was going to be. And every once in a while I still step back and surprise, like, I'm like, how am I divorced? It was not the plan. So
Wasn't
yeah,
what
you
you
can,
expected. And the
yeah,
grieving what you thought was, I think that's really powerful. Now, grieving what you thought you had and what you thought the relationship was, and then the realization that it wasn't that great anyway. So, what are we really grieving other than the
yeah,
fantasy almost?
yeah. We're grieving potential. We're grieving expectations. We're grieving, yeah, the fantasy. And I can articulate it really, really well. But at the same time, it doesn't mean, like, every once in a while a little wave will hit my legs about it. And but at least, I have a delineation of what it is I'm grieving. I don't miss him, you know, but I kind of miss the fantasy, you
Yeah.
know, and that part of it is tricky. Also, part of it is we spent over 30 years together. And I also know, like, pretty much anybody I would meet in my future who would be a partner is going to experience a different set of time period that it just doesn't compare, you know. And I have to keep myself in that space of all of the things that we did together that were ridiculously successful. And you know, raising a family of two kids who are incredibly independent and successful, and um, don't, you know, need us. Obviously, you know, we're parents and will be, and financially they still need us, but you know, are not calling every day and they're not struggling. They are on their own and
Yeah.
doing great. And the fact that we both, you know, I did help him in his career and he does have great success and he's ridden an amazing wave that I do take, I get, you know, I have advantages of, and you know, take advantage of those when I can. So those are things we did really, really successfully, and I can celebrate. Um, you know, he sometimes says, you know, if we did it all over again, I would do it the same. And I think, oh no, I would do it all differently.
Very different.
Hindsight, 2020, right? But that goes back to, you know, keeping your foot in the career and like having a um, having an understanding of money.
Mm.
I wish I paid a little bit more attention to that. So when we did sit down and look at our finances and our portfolio, it wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be. And actually, I was the one that sat down and said, "Yeah, we're not doing that anymore. You know, we're
Mm.
going to put money towards this. We don't need this. We need to redo our trusts." You know, and I wish I had kept more on top of that stuff. So I guess if I had any, you know, regrets in that respect, I wish I'd spent more time being on top of that. But now I get to do that for myself, which
Yeah,
is very empowering.
exactly.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Jeannie. I mean, this has been so thank you for coming and talking to me. I loved it, and I think it was really important to hear what you had to say. What would you say is your one better divorce tip that you could offer of all of the lessons you've learned? What would you offer to others to have a better divorce?
Be prepared. I would say prepare yourself, read the articles, read the books, ask a lot of questions, talk to your divorce friends, and then lower your expectations. So you can prepare yourself so much and you can have a certain standard, but you can't expect other people to meet your standard. And that is something that's a life lesson I've learned. But I'm really glad about the amount of questions I asked. I felt at a disadvantage because I didn't, you know, hopefully you've never been through divorce before. And so I need to figure out what this is about so that when I step in and talk to you or the mediator, that I know what you're talking about. So as soon as we had our early meetings with the mediator, I knew what she was talking about. We ended up spending a lot of time explaining it to him. And um, that just like, you know, for any kind of a test, you know, you want to get sure, make sure that you have all the information, get yourself. And one of the first things I did is we sat down with our financial advisors and got, you know, a whole portfolio in front of me so I could see everything. Um, you know, you have all those rights to that, and making sure that you are just, you know, really well informed. That would be my best tip. And don't expect others to tell you what to do. Make sure you ask the questions so you can make those decisions for yourself and advocate for yourself, as you and I talked about.
Thank you. Yeah, so 2 parts. Be as prepared as you can, and be
Mhm.
proactive about the information that you need, and
Mhm.
and don't expect others to, be prepared for when things don't go your way too. Don't expect that everything to go your way, but be prepared so you can ask the questions. That's really what I think
Yeah.
you epitomized, for sure.
Yeah, and one of the things you and I you were so good about is helping me prioritize what was worth fighting for. and what was kind of on the bubble that I could give up. Okay, I'm not going to go, I'm going to accept that, but let's go for this over here instead. And that's why you're important in that equation, to help me evaluate like the likelihood of something being able to go through or not. And that's why you bring in advisors to do that for you. So that, so you also, just like any negotiation, being prepared for what you're going to concede to.
Right. Yes, exactly. Know what's really important and what you can give up.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Ginny. Now, if somebody wants to find your blogging or reach out to you in any way for the tours or anything, how can people find you?
Yeah, the blogging is betterafter50.com. And I haven't written anything recently because I'm just so busy, which is a good thing. But there's stuff and a lot of stuff about a lot of what we've talked about in there. So that's and they usually have a little bit of a pithy tone to them. And NYC Encounters tours.com is where you can see my schedule and whether the things I do here around New York, online and in-person tours. And you can contact me there. So all my information, my emails is on there. So that's what it gets.
Yeah, I can't wait to do a tour with you. So that's going to be coming. I can't wait. So thank you, Ginny. Thank you, everyone. This has been another episode of A Better Divorce podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe. And this will help others who are seeking a better divorce find us. Thank you again, and we'll see you on the next episode. You've been tuning in to another episode of A Better Divorce podcast with Andrea Vacca. Thank you for subscribing, leaving your positive comments and reviews, and sharing the show with others. You can watch episodes at vaccalaw.com, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can listen through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Bye for now, and remember, you can have a better divorce.